Everyone, and welcome. This is SharePoint Power Hour. This is a live show that we do every Wednesday at 11 Central. I'm Laura Rogers, and this is my team from Rackspace. We're a bunch of SharePoint consultants. SharePoint Power Hour, again, it's live, free every Wednesday, just streaming on this Google Hangout and YouTube Live. And it's all about just out-of-the-box solutions in SharePoint and Office 365. It's not any kind of programming. It's not any kind of server administration, but it's just all kinds of other topics that that you can do. And we have about 80-something that we've done so far. It's been almost 2 years since we started doing these, and they're in our YouTube channel, SharePoint RAX. And there's a whole playlist where you can dig through those. And if you're watching live, Tavis is gonna do his demo today and some awesome BI stuff, some reporting. But if you're watching live, you can, if you're in YouTube, you can click a little link that will take you, a little yellow link on the video that will take you over to the Google Hangout. And when you're in the Google Hangout, there will be a little, by default, it's going to have a little app down the right side that says Showcase, and that's just got some links that we've shared. But you can use a little icon that's got some little squares at the top right to be able to toggle to the other app, which is the Q&A, and that lets you actually ask us questions live, which is the whole reason we do it streaming live like this. So feel free, if you like, to just go into the Q&A, make sure you can find it, and just say hello and say that you found it, and happy Wednesday. And I'll go ahead and introduce myself real quick, and then we'll go through the whole team, and Tavis will do his demo. I'm Laura Rogers. I'm a Microsoft MVP, and I've got about 12 years of experience with SharePoint now, and I love doing just out-of-the-box stuff in SharePoint, workflows and forms mostly, and just building custom business solutions without having to write code. Joelle, and then Kevin, and then Ryan. Okay, Joelle, go next.
All right. I'm Joelle Farley. I am a business solutions consultant here, and I specialize a lot in information architecture, taxonomy, forms, workflows, and things like that. And I am based out of Atlanta, Georgia, and I have worked with SharePoint for about 6 or 7 years now. And I like Tavis has like the best presentations. They're the most like polished presentations you'll ever see. So he's shaking his head. I don't care. You still do.
But, packing on the pressure.
So you guys should be super pumped about it, is all I was going to say. All right, I'll shut up. Bye.
Good morning. I'm Kevin Hughes, SharePoint architect here at Rackspace. I'm based out of Kansas City. I remember SharePoint when it was a lowly little baby front page extension, and started using it to focus my career exclusively around 2007 as a platform for delivering solutions. I have a role here that is pretty much talk to our clients or potential clients, figure out what they need, figure out how to deliver that to them in a SharePoint, and work with the rest of our team to make it happen.
Hi everybody, I am Ryan Keller. I'm the branding guy here on the team. My role, as you might guess, is to brand SharePoint, or in other words, to make it look pretty. So that might mean just some minor changes to the out-of-the-box look and feel, or it might mean a complete rebrand of the entire platform, depending on what the client wants. We might do something very complicated, very simple, but we offer a whole range of branding services. So it's kept me busy for the last 4 or 5 years. I'm based out of Colorado and been working with SharePoint since the year 2007 and the version 2003. It's been a while.
Awesome, and I guess that brings it to me. I'm Tavis Lovell, and I have an introduction slide, so I guess this is the last time you're going to see my face for the rest of the presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's see here. Full screen 2. All right, you guys are hopefully seeing my screen now.
Nothing yet.
Awesome.
Unless your screen is supposed to be black.
Let me try again. Full screen 2. Go. Go gadget screen share.
It's just black. Yeah.
Let me try and take this out of full screen mode. How's about now?
Still black.
Try sharing. Can you share just the PowerPoint app, maybe?
It's all in a VM. I've never had problems before, though. Let me see if there's something else I can pick.
Do you have dual monitors?
Yes.
Try switching monitors. That helped me once. I switched everything and then tried sharing the other monitor. I don't know why. It might be like a Google thing.
Let me try the VM workstation real quick, but then I will try that. I can see it down there now.
There you go.
Okay, awesome. Weird. I guess I just didn't want to share my second monitor. Okay.
Strange.
Note. Let's see if I go full screen if it totally messes up. No. All right. Good deal. So, yeah, my name is Tavis Lovell, and I, too, am a consultant on the business solutions team at Rackspace. I've been working on that team for about 2.5 years or so, a little over 2.5 years, I think. And I'm based out of Cincinnati, Ohio. Technically, I live in Kentucky, about a 10 or 15-minute drive from downtown Cincinnati, depending on traffic. And I've been doing consulting for roughly 9 years, since like 2005, and about 90% of that has been focused on the Microsoft BI stack. So I started off really with Access, actually, and then moved on to SQL Server 2000 and got into a lot of stored procedure writing and view writing, and then eventually reporting services, and then DTS, and then SQL Server 2005 came out, and I got into like integration services and analysis services and data warehouse design, and then a lot of tools started integrating with SharePoint, and some of the BI tools just straight up live in SharePoint now, so I eventually started making my way into SharePoint a little bit as well. So that's kind of my background. I have a few certifications and books I've helped to write a little bit, and some speaking stuff I've done. I'll let you read that at your leisure. And then I have a blog out at tavislevel.com. I will definitely be referencing that because some of the code I need to do some of the stuff we're going to do today is out there, and I don't know it off the top of my head. So we're going to go out and see how insanely useful my blog is. And then also you can find me at Twitter. If you want to follow me, it's at tavislevel. Anytime I do one of these presentations, I'll always tweet something out, and or if I make a new blog post or anything kind of technology related that I'm doing that's significant, I will tweet out usually. I'm a big believer in balance, so when I'm not doing that nerdy type of stuff, I very much enjoy motorcycles and scooters, which are arguably just as nerdy actually, and playing guitar and writing songs and recording stuff. All right, that's enough about me. Today's presentation I titled Advanced Reporting Scenarios with SharePoint Lists. As soon as I sent out that title, I kind of regretted it. I was like, I'm probably going to get dinged on that, calling this advanced. So I guess advanced is a matter of perspective, but what we're going to look at is 3 specific scenarios that I feel like after you've worked with either reporting services or Excel services for a while, you might run up against if you're reporting off of SharePoint lists. And we'll talk about solutions to overcome those that are a little bit technical. So the 3 that we're going to look at, the first one is going to be getting distinct values from a SharePoint list with reporting services so we can populate a parameter dropdown. Unfortunately, when you're querying SharePoint lists, the camel language doesn't really have any way to get a set of distinct values or a group by function or anything. So it takes some finagling inside of reporting services to make that happen. Otherwise, your dropdown with whatever you're filtering on, in our case it's going to be stores, would have as many entries as stores that are in there, right? As many rows that have a store in it. So in our case, I think we have like 170 or something. So, but there are only 5 stores. So we don't want to see 170 stores, a lot of them repeating. We just want the 5 that we care about. We'll talk about doing that, and then the second scenario is reporting against libraries that have folders in them. And this is a question I probably get about once or twice a year. How do I get into a folder that's in a document library if I want to report off of items in there? Or even how do I report off of everything in that document library, even if there are folders in that library? We'll be covering both of those scenarios in number 2. And then the last one, 3, is passing filters to listdata.svc. So we've had some other Power Hours that talked about reporting off of SharePoint lists in Excel. This one is going to take it just a little bit further, and we're going to start to filter some of that data down before we get it into our Excel workbook, so we're passing less data across the wire, so to speak, which is just a good thing if you want to kind of conserve network traffic. All right. Without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into some demo here. Let me get out of full screen mode, and we're going to go into my SharePoint sites, which I probably should have already brought up, but I didn't. So ADMINISTRATOR. Okay, so I have 2 sites that we're going to look at here. One has kind of the data we'll be pulling, then one has just a sample report that I've kind of made ahead of time so we can look at what our goal is. All right. The list we're going to be reporting off of is this trouble tickets list, and we'll just take a quick look at it. Like I said, we've got stores. You can see that they're repeating a whole bunch of times here. Those stores have the name, state, city, a category. For the trouble ticket, that is the row is about, a description, whether or not it's resolved, the duration in days, and then when it was resolved, both month and year. So what we ultimately want to get to is, and I didn't spend any time making this report look pretty, it's pretty clunky, but it will look something like this. And here's what we're really concerned about, getting those distinct stores to show up in this dropdown. But if we run this report, we'll see that it's basically just pulling back some random data, and I put store first over here just so it's very easy to tell that our filter is working when we start to use it, because if you select one, we'll only see one store. All right, so without further ado, let's go ahead and open up Report Builder and take a look at the problem and the solution. So I'm going to go to Files, New Document, and Report Builder. And again, I'm kind of skimming over a lot of this. That's, I guess, maybe why I called this advanced, because I'm not talking about how to add content types, or we're going to talk about setting up the data sources, but not really in depth. It's working on it. Man, this takes a really long time. Maybe I should have opened this up first too.
We'll just like do a song and dance. Dun, dun,
I know. I feel like the Jeopardy music is playing in my head right now. All right, there we go. Blank report. We're just going to start off with a blank report, and we're going to create a data source like you always would to connect to a SharePoint list. We're going to call it SP. We're going to say use a embedded data source, and for connection type, we're going to go down here to SharePoint list. The connection string for these is always just the URL to the actual site that the list is on. In my case, that is a sub-site, so we're going to get the site and then the sub-site as well. Copy that guy, paste it in, and that's all there is for the connection string. For the credentials, I'm going to change these to use current Windows user. We'll click OK, and there is our data source. So next we want to tell it what data specifically we want from there. We do that by creating a data set. We'll call this trouble tickets, I guess. And this will be an embedded data set as well. We're going to point it to our data source that we just created over here, SP. And then to write the query, we're going to use the query designer, because writing camel manually is zero fun. This will give us a list of all the lists, a list of lists that we can choose from. Ours is trouble ticket. We'll pick that, and then we're just going to pick a few items from here. So we'll do store, maybe, I don't know, city, state, category, description, and maybe ticket duration in days. That should be enough. We just want some data. So we got that selected. We're going to go ahead and click OK. And then OK again. And right there is our data set with all of our values. So let's go ahead and throw that into a table real quick. Let's use a table wizard. We'll select our data set trouble tickets that we just created. And I'm just going to click these guys in there. Looks like I didn't get store state. That's fine though. We'll click next. We're going to leave the expand collapse buttons on here just so it's easy to see when stores are filtered out. Click next. That style looks fine to me. And here is our report. So we'll go ahead and test run this and see that it is indeed coming back with data. Looks like everything's good. There's data in there. So at this point, we're feeling pretty good about ourselves. Let's add a parameter to this so we can start filtering the stores. So the next thing we would do is you can either add a parameter to this parameters folder, or you can create a parameter in the data set and it will create that parameter for you automatically here. If you create the parameter here, then you have to go in here and manually wire it up to the data set anyway. So I usually just create them right here in the data set. Saves a little time. We'll go back to Query Designer, and to create that parameter, down here under Applied Filters, you would click Add Filter. And what we want to filter against is the store. So that's already selected, but you've got everything, in your data set here available. For the operator, we're going to change it from contains to just is, which is equivalent to equal. And then we're going to check the parameter box, which is basically telling reporting services that this is a value that will be supplied at runtime of the report. And then we'll click OK. And then we'll see this error. Filter for a SharePoint query can specify only one value. I don't know why it's set up by default like this, but it doesn't like the fact that you have none underneath the value. So you can either type something in here, or you can select blank, and that will solve your problems. So it's kind of a weird quirk when you're adding parameters to SharePoint list queries. So what we've just done here is we've basically added this extra piece of our query by adding that filter. And we're saying the query is, it's going to be an equal comparison, and we're comparing the store field to the store parameter. So note, like I said before, there's no parameters existing over here right now. It's going to create one that's called, it'll have the same name as the field that we're filtering against. So if I hit OK, you'll notice a plus sign will appear next to the parameters folder. Boop. And it's just as easy as that. And now we can see our parameter under parameters. So let's go ahead and run this again. And we see that we now have a parameter that we can type stuff into. If we type something that's not valid, it's going to give us nothing, because nothing is going to match that. So to get an actual value, we'd have to put something in that's valid. I'll go ahead and grab a valid value and paste it in there, just to make sure that it's working. And it is working, so I think we're good. The next thing we want to do is really make this parameter something that can be selected, right? Typing stuff in is no way to live. So to do that, we can go into the parameter here, and under available values, you have a couple of different options. You have none, which it currently is set to, so you have to type it in. We could specify values. So if we knew what all the values were going to be, we could just hit add a whole bunch of times and add the label and the value to these, so that these would appear in the parameter dropdown. But that's not really the best way of doing things, because if like a new store got added to a list, there's a couple of things that would need to happen. First, we need to know that a new store got added to the list. And then secondly, we'd have to come into this report, crack it open, and add this value, and then save it back out. And that just sounds like a lot of work that I don't want to do. So the better option is to really just use the get values from a query option. So as soon as a new store hits that list, it's going to automatically show up in our parameters dropdown. So to do that, we're going to have to make a new data set first that has our values in it. So let's go ahead and hit cancel here for now. We'll go back to data sets, and from data set, or add a data set, we'll call this one DD store, just as kind of a general practice. Anything that's going to be in a dropdown, I usually prefix with DD, so it's easy to tell which of my queries are in dropdowns. Then we'll go to make it an embedded. We'll point it back to the SP data source.
Travis, we have somebody saying that your screen is very tiny. Do you have any way of doing, do you have like a zoom thing you can do or anything like that on there?
I do not, no.
Okay. That's cool.
I mean, there's like a zoom here. I don't know if that's, I think that's only for when you're not in the designer. I don't know. Is it tiny for you guys?
I can read it.
No.
Okay, yeah, I don't know.
I mean, maybe just go full screen in YouTube for that person who's saying that.
Yeah. So, sorry. maybe you can play it back in YouTube later at high definition, and it will look good, hopefully. So moving on, what were we doing? Getting the stores. So we're going to go to trouble ticket, grab our store. And one thing you might note here, if you've ever used reporting services against like SQL Server or another data source that's a little bit more robust than a SharePoint list, is one, you would have typically an area in here that would allow you to join tables together. That is gone because you can only select from one SharePoint list at a time. And there's also usually an aggregates window over here on the selected fields window that will allow you to do things like sum, or get the max of something, or group by, which would get you distinct values. None of that stuff is available, however, in the Camel language. So we are kind of stuck getting all the stores. And we're going to see that when we click OK, and we assign it to our store parameter. So let's say get from a query. We're going to point it to our data set that we just created, and select store for both the value and the label. The label is just what you see. The value is what gets passed into the actual data set that's using the parameter, just for reference. And if we run this, we see all the stores for every row in our list, basically, and the stores are repeating quite a bit, and we don't want that to happen, right? But it does work. Just it's better than having to type it in, so we're one step closer to perfection, I suppose. Let's go back to design and do a little more work. The way you kind of get around this is I'm going to create a new parameter and call it store dummy. And for available values, I'm going to assign it the same values from DD store. And I'm even going to assign it the default values of DD store as well. And this is important that you assign the default values here. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make this a multiple values parameter. So I'm going to check this box right here. And we'll click OK. And when I was originally trying to figure this out, I thought I was pretty close when I saw this. Over in the store dummy parameter, since I set the defaults, when I hit the drop-down, I see that only unique values are selected. Even though it's got all the values, since I set the default to everything in the list, it behind the scenes is only checking each one of those once. And I was like, perfect. Now all I need to do is set the selected values in this parameter equal to the available values in the store parameter, right? That made sense to me. So let's implement that and see where it all falls apart. So over in store, instead of getting your available values from a query, we're going to specify the values. We're going to do it a little trickier by using this functions button. And instead of null, we're going to assign it the values of our dummy parameter, store dummy parameter. Except it does come with this index of 0 here because it's a multi-select, and that's an array behind the scenes. So we're going to take that off so we get all of the values. Otherwise, you just get the first value in the array. And we're going to do the same thing for label here as well. Throw both of those guys in there, click OK back out, and hopefully we're good to go. Let's run. And we're not. So there's 4 dependencies here. Because I'm assigning the values of store dummy to store dummy actually has to come first. So the order that these parameters appear in is actually important. So just knock that up to the top of the list, and then we should be good. Okay. So let's take a look at our store. Gah, still all the values, right? Bummer. Let's take a look at our store dummy. Still got just the 5 selected. Okay, we're not going to do anything with this. We're just going to click off of it. And now let's look at our store. What? What's going on? Right? So now it works. So basically what's happening kind of behind the scenes is it must be doing some things out of order, at least out of the order that I want them to. So it's getting all of the available values for these, but it's not actually reassigning the default values for, or it's not reassigning the available values as the selected values until this is clicked once. So the default values just get applied to this, but it doesn't make all the other downstream parameters refresh to what default has been set for the parent parameter. Hopefully that makes sense. Anyway, kind of a drag. So let's go back to design, and what we're going to eventually have to do here is we're going to need to add some code to our report to make this work, and we're going to write a function that is going to get us our distinct values. So to add code to a report, you need to make sure that you're off of the report body. You want to be like over here in no man's land, and right-click and go to Report Properties, and there'll be this nice little code window here where you can insert your custom code, which I happen to have in this PowerPoint, which I will make available after this. So we're going to copy our dedupe code and then paste it in here, and I think it's just gray because it's pasted from PowerPoint, but we'll hit OK and then we'll go back in there, and now it's easier to see. Although the text is very small, I apologize. Maybe it would be easier if we looked at it in our PowerPoint. So this function is called remove dupes, and it's accepting a string called items. And it's also declaring a no dupes variable that is an array and a SP values variable. In the SP values variable, we're throwing in all of our items and we're splitting them by commas. So it's going to have all the items in SP values, and then we're going to loop through that SP values until we run out of values to loop through. And in our no dupes array, basically every time we go through the loop, we're going to say, is this value currently in the no dupes array? If it is, pop it on the stack. Or if it's not currently in the no dupes array, pop it on the stack. If it is currently in there, then forget about it. Let's go to the next value. And we just keep doing that over and over and over until we run out of values. And then our no dupes array will have a list of all the distinct values. And then the end of the code here is basically just taking that, putting it into a string, and then returning that string to whatever called it. All right. So now that that is in our report, we're going to need to call that function. The way we do that is we would go to our store parameter over here, and we go to available values, and instead of setting it equals to parameter of store dummy, we would call this right here. So before I paste this in, I'll just go ahead and say what this does. Basically, code.remove dupes, that's the name of our function, right? So we're calling our function we just put in there, and we're passing it that items that it accepts, right? So in our case, that's going to be parameters, your parameter name, which is going to be store dummy in our case, which has all the values. And we're joining it because it needs a string, and this is currently an array, so we do a join, and we put them all together in a string separated by a comma. And then finally, when we get them back to our parameter, we're splitting them apart again once we get the value back from the function. So that may be a little bit complicated to follow, but if you download the PowerPoint afterwards, you can check it out. We're going to go ahead and throw this in here. I'm going to change that from your parameter name to store dummy. And then we'll do the same thing for label here. And click OK, and OK again. And now when we run our report, ta-da! We've got distinct values inside of our store parameter. So it's just that easy, folks. It's just that easy. The next thing we'd probably want to do is get rid of our store dummy parameter. This is just really not going to be used by any of the end users. So we can hide that by double-clicking on store dummy, going to parameter visibility, and we can either hide it or we could just make it internal. Internal would make it so people can't pass parameters into it from outside of the report, which is fine because there wouldn't really be a lot of cause for them to do that. So we'll make it internal. We'll click OK, and now we've got our nice report. Okay, so what if you wanted to make this a multi-select parameter? So we could have all of the stores or maybe just one or two of the stores here. The way you would typically do that is you could just go down here to our store parameter, double click on it, go to allow multiple values, click OK, and you'd be good to go. But in this case, it's not going to work. We can, even if we select one value, it's still blowing up in our faces here. And it's saying cannot add multi-value query parameter store for dataset trouble tickets because it's not supported, blah, 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 blah. And at the end of the day, what it boils down to is in our trouble tickets dataset here, there's no way to pass in that type of array parameter to a camel query. So we've got some choices though. Right now, it's a parameter that's in the data set. So when this query gets issued to SharePoint, it issues it with the parameter, and SharePoint only returns back the data that matches that criteria, right? Which is nice because we're sending less data over the wire again. If we change this, though, we could actually get the capabilities that we want to be able to select multiple values. We'd have to change it from a parameter, which is done before the data gets returned, to a filter, which is done after the data is returned to reporting services. So in this scenario, all of the data from that list would come back to reporting services, and reporting services is going to be responsible for filtering that data for us. So we're shifting some of the load to reporting services. So let's go ahead and make that happen. We'll go to Query Designer, and we will remove our applied filter here. So our parameter is now gone, and you can see that in our camel query. There's no more where clause here. And we'll go to Filters, and we'll add a filter that is store. The operator shouldn't be equals. It should actually be in, because we're comparing against multiple things. And then the value would be our parameter of store minus that 0 index. All right, let's go ahead and click OK. OK back out. Run it. And now we should be able to select all stores, for instance. Or maybe just SSRS and Thor's Drum Shop. Do you get it? Thor's Drum Shop, because he brings the thunder? Yes. All right.
Ba-dun-dun.
I thought that was pretty good myself. All right. Anyways, it looks like it's working. If we wanted to take it a step further and just default this to all values being selected whenever the report is run, that's pretty easy to do too. We could go into our store parameter here, and for default values, we would just assign it the same thing that's in available values. So I'd maybe grab this script here where we call our function, go to default values, and throw that same function call in there. And now when we run it, it'll always come up to everything selected. Okay, so that's kind of a one-off thing where I don't know if you do a lot of reporting off SharePoint lists, you're probably going to run into that eventually, and there's kind of a workaround for it. So barring any questions, I will move on, going once, going twice. The next thing we're going to talk about is reporting on folders. So let me think about where I put the folder. I think it's on SP Cincy 2015 under Documents. Yes. Here we have a scenario that I have created. Documents, a document library, the default document library with 2 folders in it, and a document that is not in any folder. So in folder 1, we have documents B, C, and D. And then in folder 2, we have E and F. So a total of 6 documents. And for our first scenario, we're just going to connect to this and see what SharePoint does out of the box when you try and connect to a document library with folders. So I'm going to go ahead and throw this report away and create a new one. And for data sources, we're going to connect just like we did before. We'll call this SP again for SharePoint. Make it embedded. Use the Microsoft SharePoint list connection type. And then For the connection string, it is going to once again be the site or subsite that has the list, or in this case, document library that we want to report off of. And we'll set the credentials to use current Windows user again. Okay, so there's our data source. Let's go out and get our SharePoint list data. So we'll go to, we'll call this we'll call that SharePoint data source, because this is the only one that's actually going to use a SharePoint data source. All right, we're pointing it back to our SP data source there for our query. This time, instead of trouble ticket, we're going to go over to documents, and we'll pick title, and notes will be good. And then also, if there are folders in your document library, you're going to have these additional columns that are item child count and folder child count, which are kind of cool. So we'll go ahead and add those here as well. I'll click OK, OK back out, and let's add these guys to a table. So title, notes, item child count, and folder child count. We'll hit run, and what we get is we get all the documents listed in that library, but for anything that's in a folder, we just get the fact that there is a folder there, and we get the name of that folder. And then we do get, like I said, these nice kind of counts here, though. So if there were subfolders or child folders in these folders, I'm assuming that they would be counted here. I've never actually tried that out, but I can't imagine what else that would be for. And then we get the item counts in here. So we know that this is correct. So folder 1 had 3 items, folder 2 had 2 items. We know that to be true. So for our first scenario, we're going to look in just folder 1. Let's say, all right, we have this document library. The only stuff we care to have in our report here is just the stuff from folder 1. How do I get into that folder? As far as I know, there's no way to do it using that SharePoint connection type. So if we go back to here, this guy. In order to make this work, the only way I know of doing it anyways, is using an XML data type and actually putting together your own web service call to return the data. So what does that look like? Well, let's see. First of all, we need a XML data source. So we're going to go to add data source again. We'll simply call this one XML. And for credentials for this, we're going to go ahead. I guess I got to tell it what kind it is first. So we're going to use an embedded, and then instead of SharePoint list, there is a XML selection in here that you can choose. For the connection string, this one is a little bit different. It's still the URL to your site and your subsite, if you have one. But you're going to want to add /vti_bin/lists.asmx. So we're going to be calling that web service. Let's go ahead and change our credentials. For this, you're going to need to use a service account. It won't let you get away with Kerberos delegation, I don't believe. So I'm going to type something you should never type in here, which is the administrator password for my test farm. But obviously, you would want to create a service account specifically for this purpose that had really only the permissions it needs to do reporting. So in this case, it would need permissions to that document library within SharePoint. And because this is a domain account, I'm going to go ahead and check use as Windows credentials, and then we'll click OK. And there is our XML data source. So the next thing we want to do is create our query for this, or data set. So we'll go to add data sets again, and we'll call this one peek into folder 1. Sounds like a good name. We'll make it embedded as well. And for the data source, we're going to point it not to SP, but into the XML data source. And when you hit Query Designer, you're going to see that this is much less friendly than when you use the SharePoint Query Designer, because there's no graphical type of select this and it'll build your query for you. You're going to have to know how to build it yourself.
Kind of spoiled, aren't we?
Yes, indeed. So I don't remember what this looks like, so we're going to have to go out to my blog real quick. Actually, I think I have it also in here, which I will put out. I meant to put this out before the Power Hour, but I totally forgot. Here's the post, but it's also the last post that I wrote, I'm pretty sure. So if you go out there, it should be the first one.
I did put your blog out on our little showcase app, too.
Cool. So you should probably read all this if you are doing this your first time, but I'm going to skip it. Seems like I read it before. And I know that the code I need is right here. And you also note that this is color-coded for what you need to change here. It's going to tell you, pretty easy to figure out, I hope. That's my intent anyway. So I've grabbed this query, which is basically the call to the web service. I'm going to paste it in here. And I mean, a lot of this is just kind of standard stuff for a call. The things we really need to pay attention to here are the parameters. So here's a parameters tag, and our first parameter here is called list name. Now this is not asking for you to, this is the name of the parameter. This is not asking for the name of your list here anyway. It's asking for the name of your list here between the default values tag. And we are going to type in documents, because that's the name of our library. And then there is a second parameter here that is the query options parameter, and we need to pass it the URL to our folder. So that's going to be basically just the URL to your site, if you have a subsite, that all the way down to the folder, and then whenever you get to the folder, just slash whatever the folder name is. So for our scenario, go out here and highlight this again. All the way up to documents is where we're at. We don't need that forms, all items, that ASPX there. And we'll throw this in here. And then our folder isn't called folder A, it's actually called folder 1. So that is all the configurations I think we need to change in here. If luck is on our side, we'll click OK. And OK again. And it looks like things are working a little bit for us because it's actually gone out and got some column names for us. Something to note is that these column names aren't quite as friendly as what you see when you use that SharePoint data source, right? For starters, there's no title. But you can get similar things, like we can use the link file name to get to the document name. And then like notes also here is notes 0 for some reason instead of notes up here. I don't know why it appended a 0 there, but it did for whatever reason. So let's go ahead and throw this into a table. We'll do link file name and notes. I'm going to get rid of this guy, make it a little bigger, and run it. And we're seeing that we are getting 3 documents, B, C, and D, which is what we know that we should be getting back. And you can confirm that because there's 3 in folder 1 up here. We see the 3 are appearing when we're in folder 1. Okay, so that's how you get into a specific folder in a document library. What if we want all of the documents that are in a document library, regardless of if they are in a folder or not? And that looks a little bit different. Let's go back to design. We're still going to use an XML data source for this, but our web service call is going to look a little bit different. So we'll say this, give me everything. And it'll be embedded again. We'll point it to our XML data source. Our query is going to be out on my blog. So let's head out there and scroll down a little bit, and here it is. and we'll paste it in. And on this one, we have a little less to change. We still have that same list name parameter to change. So our list name is, once again, documents. And then the second parameter we're passing in, we don't actually need to change anything on. And this is the query options parameter. And we're passing it a value of view attributes scope equals recursive. And that's what makes it get everything from the library. Let's go ahead and click OK. And OK once more. And let's add these guys to a table. So we'll get the same things here, not doc icon, link file name, and notes. And with any luck, once again, we will have all the documents this time. And there we see A, B, C, D, E, F. They are all there. So we have successfully gotten everything from our library. So hopefully that solves some questions around reporting from folders in SharePoint libraries, because I know I've seen several blog posts out there, or at least a while ago, where people are like, it's not possible. I was too stubborn.
Yeah, and when you look in the forums, a lot of people ask about how to do this, and it pretty much stumps everybody. So that's pretty awesome that you figured that out.
Yeah, it took a while, but at the end of the blog, see, I'd done it once, and I remember it took a long time to figure out, and then I didn't blog about it, and then I needed to do it again, and I had to relearn how to do it, and I was like, I'm never gonna have to relearn to do that again. I'm writing it down. So mainly my blog is for me. What was I gonna say? Oh, so if you wanted to construct other types of web service calls, there's a really good link down here that kind of shows you the different parameters you can pass in, and this is where I basically learned how to do it. It's reading through this stuff, and some of the ones that we used was folder. We passed in as an element when we went into specific folders. The view attributes parameter that we passed in. Remember, it literally says right here, to return all documents in a library, the view attributes element is used as follows. View attribute scope equals recursive. And I was like, perfect. That's exactly what I need. Anyway, there's also some additional information up here for list name, view names, and stuff. You could play around with this for quite a while. That's there at your disposal if you need it. Okay, I think that's everything for lists, and it's 12:48. So we're going to take a look at our last piece here, which is connecting to a Excel document and filtering that data that we are bringing into an Excel document. Now, we've kind of covered this before. I'm going to go over the regular way just real quick for those of you who haven't seen it, but it is in past Power Hours, and there's some blog posts too.
So the SSRS thing, that's only on premises, and that's only if they've actually installed SSRS on a SharePoint server. In this Excel, can that be Office 365 or on premises or anything?
The Excel stuff could be done in any place, yes, but the reporting services, it doesn't necessarily need to be installed on SharePoint. You could have a native mode installation for reporting services. I'm pretty sure and still be able to get that. And even if you had reporting services and then Office native dedicated somewhere in your environment, and then you had Office 365, I think you could still do those same tricks inside of Office 365. It's just reporting services isn't available in that environment. So if you had it somewhere else, you could leverage it. I don't know if it would. Yeah. Anyway, so connecting our Excel document to a SharePoint list. To do this, we create a new Excel document. We go to the Data tab. We actually want to go to From Other Sources, and the way I've always done this is there's a couple different ways, but from OData feed. And your OData feed looks like this. Probably sick of seeing me copy this.
I'm sorry, Tavis, we have a question in the Q&A.
Sure.
They say, what is the difference between SSRS native mode and SSRS in SharePoint integration mode, and does it matter for this type of thing? That's the thing that you were talking about.
So yeah, with integrated mode, I mean, you obviously need to have SharePoint, and there are some licensing considerations there. You have to have at least SQL Server Standard to integrate, and then you control all the security to your reports inside of SharePoint. You control or you deploy all your reports out to SharePoint so they actually live in document libraries. Whereas native mode, you get like this report manager URL where all that stuff is done. You control security, you deploy reports out to that URL, etc. I don't think, there used to be some limitations between the two, like you could do some things in one and not in the other, and those have gone down a lot recently. I'm pretty sure, although not 100%, just because I haven't used native in so long, that you can still connect to SharePoint lists, even if you're in native mode. But I honestly haven't touched native in a long time, just because nobody seems to have it anymore. Everybody's running, that I encounter anyway, is running SharePoint integrated. So I think you can, but I would want to double check. Okay. Where was I? Connecting. Right. So I was going to get the URL here. So the URL looks eerily similar that we need here. We're going to put in the URL to the site that has the list that we want to report off of. And we're going to say /_VTI_bin/ and this time it's going to be listdata.svc. And we'll click next. And it will take a little bit to load the list of tables here. But once it does, it should come up and allow you to select what tables you want, or tables are really SharePoint lists, and it will bring them into Excel. So for our case, we're just going to get trouble ticket. I connected to the wrong thing. Shoot. We don't have trouble ticket in here. Dang it. Yes, I did SSRS class. Shoot. All right, let's go back here and get this. It helps if you connect to the site that actually has the data you want to pull in it. And then this does take kind of a while to pull back the stuff. I'm going to show you kind of a shortcut when you're constructing these filtered query strings to not have to go through this step every time when you're building them, because the syntax can be a little tricky. We're going to go down here to trouble ticket, say yeah, next. Authentication settings, if you're going to do a refresh, we cover these in one of the previous power hours, so I'm not going to talk about them right now, but that is important if you wanted to refresh inside of SharePoint. My blog also has some stuff on that. We're going to hit finish, overwrite the data source, and we're going to put this data into a pivot table. So right now it's going out, getting the data. Now it's when you were selecting from tables, if you don't have Power Pivot in your environment and you select multiple tables, it's going to automatically start using the Power Pivot data model. And when you go to upload this to SharePoint, it will not refresh. That is something that I want you should be aware of. So if you want to have multiple tables in here, you have to select them one at a time and then like do like a VLOOKUP to join them together or something, and then make a pivot table off of the table that has the VLOOKUPs in it.
Yeah, that happened to me the other day. I opened it from Excel after I uploaded it to SharePoint, and the whole Power Pivot tab and everything was just gone.
You gotta watch out. Gotta watch out. In here, so let's add a few things. Category, and let's do maybe the ID, and we could do like the count of tickets in different categories. Okay, I really just wanted to show the categories on here. So let's say, for instance, that maybe we're reporting on a lot of different detailed data for tickets in these categories. And maybe we only really cared about like mobile devices and point of sale systems in here. So we could obviously filter this data down if you wanted to by going to like insert, slicer, category value, and then we could say, all right, we'll only show us point of sales and mobile devices. And this is all stuff I've kind of shown before, but it would really be better if instead of bringing in all this extra stuff that we don't need in the first place, why don't we just bring in only the things that we need? If we only need mobile devices and point of sale systems, let's only get that data. That's going to be, again, less data we're sending across the wire every time this workbook gets refreshed. So let's go to my PowerPoint, and we'll take a look at how you can do some of that. You can basically add filters on the end of your OData calls here. So up to right here, well, listdata.svc, it should look exactly the same. You can add a slash and then whatever your list name is, and that's no problem. So whenever, remember I had that screen that allowed me to select from multiple lists. If I had this on here, it would just only show that one list when I got to that screen when we're setting up the connection. The extra stuff is this filter. So question mark and then a $, filter equals, and then it tells us what the actual filter is. So category value equals point of sale system. And you could have multiple of these, which is shown down here in the second one, where we're saying category equals point of sale system or category equals mobile devices. So let's just grab the second one real quick because I know we're running pretty short on time here. Try and set it up and make sure it works. And let's go ahead and just close that. Don't save it. Start a new one. All right. Back to data from other sources again. OData feed. We're going to slap that in there. It looks kind of weird because it's like, spaces and or in between it, but it works. So we'll click next. And next will be that screen where I said usually it shows a whole bunch of lists. When you specify that list, it's only going to show the one that you specified, but it'll still show you that screen. It's kind of redundant, but anyway, there it is, trouble ticket. We'll click next and finish. We'll put it to a pivot table again. And while that's getting this, while you're constructing these query strings, you don't have to do it in here like I was saying earlier. You can actually go to just your web browser and throw it in there, and it will return like the XML that you'll get back. So I can see that you can check it, kind of spot check it to see if you're getting what you want. Like for instance, each one of these is an entry, like from here to here. And I can see that my category for this one is point of sale system. So I can scroll down here and see that, oh, this one's mobile devices. So you can kind of scroll through and make sure you're not getting any erroneous categories that you shouldn't be getting when you're doing the syntax for this. Of course, that's kind of painful as well. But if we select category value here, we can already see that our efforts has been successful. We're only seeing mobile devices and point of sale systems. So that's just a kind of a nice way of filtering down your data. That's not too horribly difficult. There are some additional links in here, one of which has like a lot of the technical specifications for making these types of calls, and this bookmark in here specifically goes right to the query options part. So you can see that not only can you filter, you can do things like count, order by, skip, top, and a few others. And then there's obviously a lot of different logical comparisons that you can use. Equal, not equal, greater than equal, using compound statements like and or, which we did as well. Okay, I think that's about it for the demo part of this. I did want to say that, look, I was supposed to go back and fill this out. I was like, I want to make sure I have it so they can download this, and then I totally forgot to do that. So I will put in the comments of the video what the URL is to download this PowerPoint so you can have all the links and the code that's in here and maybe work through some of the stuff yourself. In addition, if you were watching some of the reporting services stuff and you just thought, oh, holy cow, that is totally way over my head, I happen to know a guy, me, who teaches a reporting services class. The next class, it's monthly, but the next one is June 17th. And it's a 4-hour class. We really take it from step one. I don't know anything about reporting services. I have no idea how to open up Report Builder or anything. And by the end of it, by the end of the 4 hours, we're making some pretty robust reports. And we had some really good feedback from the class. So if you're interested in learning more about that, you can check it out at sharepoint.rackspace.com/SSRS-training. It has the entire syllabus there and the cost and all that good stuff. So thank you guys for humoring me and watching me talk about totally nerdy stuff.
Thanks, Tavis. That was awesome. Maybe I'm not sure what we're doing next week. We've had a couple of requests, especially last time around search stuff. So we will figure something out and we'll post it. I usually post the event on our Facebook page and also put it in our little Google Plus page as well. And it also shows in YouTube when you go to videos and then you click the drop down and choose events, it will show you upcoming events there. So thanks everybody for coming. I think we had a record for the number of live viewers. All at one time we had like 34, 35 people in here at the watching. So pretty cool. Good job, Tavis. That BI stuff's popular.
Awesome. Thanks for
All
coming,
right.
everyone.
See you guys next week.